Welcome back, everyone. Next up, we have Todos Medical Ltd. It trades on the OTCQB under the symbol TOMDF and engineers life-saving diagnostic solutions for the early detection of a variety of cancers. Please welcome its CEO, Gerald Commissiong. Welcome, Gerald.
Thank you, Anna, and thank you, everyone, for attending today's presentation. Obviously we're going to be focused on over the next period of time is on Todos Medical. And as mentioned, we develop diagnostic testing for cancer, but have expanded substantially into Alzheimer's and COVID. And we're going to talk a lot about our diagnostic programs, but as well as our therapeutic programs for COVID based upon some diagnostic work that we've done. There's the safe harbor statement. So, from a profile perspective, we develop solutions in therapeutics, diagnostics, and immune support. The most exciting program we have is our COVID-19 antiviral program, Tolovir, that is currently in clinical development as an oral antiviral 3CL protease inhibitor for the treatment of both hospitalized and non-hospitalized patients with COVID-19. The current active trial is in hospitalized patients being conducted in Israel. And I'll give an update on there momentarily, as well as the preparations for the pivotal studies that will start in India and expand globally. We are also developing the next generation of cancer, Alzheimer's, and COVID detection technologies with several different assets in that platform, all based on our understanding of the immune system and our proprietary novel technology platforms. And then what we've also done with respect to COVID is really focus on bread and butter diagnostics, just generating revenue, and that we've done through two different ways. One, our CLIA-CAP certified lab, Provista Diagnostics, is offering COVID testing, both PCR and neutralizing antibody testing, and we have leveraged our understanding of COVID and our ability to get access to reagents and supplies to be able to supply other labs with COVID testing supplies. And so as a result of that, we also generate revenue through the sales of COVID supplies to other labs. And that's been the primary source of revenue over the last 12 months. And that is now shifting towards our Provista Diagnostics lab. So let's start with the therapeutic program, Tolovir. As we all know, the U.S. National Defense Strategy against COVID has been relying on herd immunity. We're seeking to get vaccination percentages as high as possible. We know that there's challenges with that strategy. One, there's a significant anti-vax, group in the U.S., and they're quite powerful. Two, the vaccines that were actually administered several months ago appear to be losing their effectiveness. And so now you're not only dealing with a percentage of the population that's not vaccinated, you're dealing with people who were vaccinated who aren't protected and need to get further protection. So this merry-go-round of, vaccination and anti-vax has led to a situation where there's still significant risk to a significant percentage of the population, and that's driving COVID cases. This is compounded by new variants, the Delta variant being the one that now accounts for the majority of cases in the U.S. New variant, the mu variant, is coming up as one of interest, not because it's got a significant proportion, but because it appears to be able to evade immunity. And so, obviously the question is, well, if it can evade immunity from the Delta variant, if I get Delta and recover, will I immediately get mu? There's a lot of risks out there in terms of understanding how we can protect ourselves. And so at the end of the day, preventing yourself from getting COVID is obviously a great strategy, but it hasn't worked necessarily for, 100,000 plus Americans almost every day. They're getting COVID. And so we need to develop alternative routes, and we are focused on antivirals because once you get COVID, there at this point is relatively little that can be done from a treatment perspective in the outpatient setting. In the hospital, there are a number of therapies that are used in combination that help overcome some of the symptomatic issues, but some of the underlying cytokine storm and viral replication remains. So the oral antiviral is a critical component. We know this not only from the work that we're doing, but big pharma companies such as Pfizer and Merck are also developing oral antivirals. And Pfizer, acknowledged, even though they're one of the largest providers of vaccines and have the only FDA-approved vaccine on the market, that the next step in really combating this virus is for oral antivirals, and the target for the oral antivirals that they've chosen is the 3CL protease, which is the same target that we are developing at Todos. So we view this obviously as validation for our strategy, and we believe that protease inhibitors really are the best targets for viruses. They've been known to work quite well for HIV, hepatitis C, and so we are going after a well-worn target in the antiviral space. A little bit about how we're positioned. As an oral antiviral, we are not solely going after outpatient. We also are going after inpatient. And in fact, the only clinical data that we have that we will be releasing relatively soon is in the hospitalized setting, where we had some success. And so now, as we continue on that track in the hospitalized setting in Israel and prepare to initiate in India, we are quite pleased with the opportunity to treat hospitalized patients, and now the larger opportunity of outpatient, non-hospitalized patients, where the endpoints are going to be really preventing people from going to the hospital. We see these as two really significant market opportunities. And so just a little bit about Tolovir itself. It inhibits the 3CL protease. The 3CL protease enzyme is required for the replication of the nidovirus subcategory of coronaviruses. So SARS-CoV-2 is a nidovirus. Tolovir robustly inhibits the 3CL protease. And we do this really through some very clear catalytic mechanisms of action that we're looking at. And we'll get into that a little later down the line as we convey to the investment community and to the regulators how our product really, from a natural perspective, is the natural way to inhibit the nidovirus subcategory of coronavirus, and some new biology around how critical it is to inhibit the 3CL protease from a number of different perspectives, not only viral replication. In addition to this, not obviously, but our Tolovir product, it is a natural compound, and it actually the formulation has significant anti-cytokine activity as well. So this is really unique because we're not only a 3CL protease inhibitor, we're also an anti-cytokine compound. And so this combination is really what gives us confidence that we can have success in the hospitalized setting. And corollarily, of course, in a non-hospitalized setting, we think we'll have greater success in a 3CL protease inhibitor alone, because we will help people feel better faster. And that's really what it boils down to. In addition to this, our regulatory strategy is obviously to obtain defensible and differentiating claims as an oral treatment. So it's not only the 3CL protease to inhibit replication of the virus, but to improve symptoms, which obviously patients are very focused on. So why, can a small company like Todos, be able to compete in this space? Well, it's because our joint venture partners, NLC Pharma, have been working in this area for 20 plus years. So the observational phase 1/2 study, which was completed, which data will be released later on this quarter, led to very favorable outcomes. And this is really what led us to start the double-blind placebo-controlled trials. The double-blind placebo-controlled trial in Israel is currently enrolling, and enrollment's going quite well. We expect to be adding sites to further speed enrollment, and we're engaging with regulators about, how we can accelerate the pathway to market based upon the data that we expect to see in Israel. We know that Israel has obviously been a leader in the world in a number of areas with COVID-19, and we expect that to continue here with Tolovir. And then in addition to that, obviously different regulatory agencies around the world will require different standards for approval. And so we are preparing for a global phase 2/3 clinical trial in both hospitalized and non-hospitalized patients that is slated to start in India. We've selected a CRO for that study, and we are in the process of getting ready for trial initiation, which will obviously be a major milestone to complement the phase 2 study ongoing in Israel. Also, and importantly, we've made some progress in terms of the CROs for US IND in the, here in the US to really support and further validate our strategy from a global perspective. And we expect to have insights and news on that coming up in the very, very near future. And really, this is all about harmonizing our global phase 2/3 strategy. Now, that was all Tolovir, which is, our proprietary regulated product for which we will be making claims related to COVID-19 and its effects and treatment for patients that will be related to the symptoms associated with the disease and which patients will benefit the most. We also have a separate but related product called Tolovid, which is made up of largely the same material. And that is actually on the market in the US as a dietary supplement. And the FDA granted us in the first half of this year, actually, no, it was in July, a claim for Tolovid. Beyond simple immune support, we received the claim as a 3CL protease inhibitor based upon in vitro studies. So the FDA obviously would not allow us to go any further than that with regards to the claims that we can make about the Tolovid product, but we already feel, based upon an increasing understanding of the role of protease and protease inhibitors in the viral space, and Pfizer's, obviously very significant education through their breakthroughs.com website on the importance of the 3CL protease in different areas of coronaviruses. We believe that this gives some marketing advantage for Tolovid to be able to have this 3CL protease claim. So we have different formulations of Tolovid. The one that is primarily being sold now is a 5-day dosing formulation. So you take 12 pills 5 times a day. From a safety perspective, this has been dosed in Israel up to 40 pills per day without any significant adverse events. So, we feel as though this is a product that people can take when they are feel that their immune systems have been compromised, and this will provide immune support to maintain and regain healthy function. It's available today. It can be bought at www.mytolovid.com. We are currently working on Amazon and Alibaba sales channels. We recently got approved in Amazon, and now we're in the process of getting our supply over so that Amazon can fulfill. And we expect to have news in that direction very soon. We recently increased the price from $135 to $199. This is really twofold. One, as a small company, obviously being able to generate revenue and reinvest that to build out our supply chain is critical. But two, we were able to get a second FDA authorization for a complementary product that is not a 5-day dosing regimen, but rather a daily dosing regimen. And we call this Tolovid Daily. And this is really going to be the mass marketed product. This product is targeted at the $99 price point, and also received the 3CL protease inhibition claim from the FDA. And its dosing regimen is really to be used for daily support, so twice daily. So we recommend, obviously, Tolovid Daily. We think everybody should take it, and we think everybody should take it every day, and we think it will assist in inhibiting any 3CL proteases that people encounter, through circulating moieties that may be out there. So this is a subscription model is being established for this, and we expect it to be on auto ship. And so this is, we see this as a very significant product going forward for the company, and we'll really build out our revenue around it. Beyond that, going back to the bread and butter of Todos, as we mentioned, Todos started out as a diagnostic company. We recently acquired a CLIA-CAP certified lab in Atlanta, Georgia to really operationalize the intellectual property. But as part of that acquisition of Provista, we also gained a molecular diagnostics lab. And in that molecular diagnostics lab, we are currently running PCR COVID testing. As many know who follow the company, over the last 12 months, we established a distribution business for automation and the reagents and supplies to allow for other labs to do COVID testing. And we deployed that here, at Provista, where we now have very significant automation and capacity to be able to run well in excess of 20,000 tests per day, PCR tests as needed. And we are ramping that based upon what we expect in terms of in-state demand here in Georgia and developing relationships. And then in addition to that, we are running the CPAS test, which is a neutralizing antibody test for which we've gotten a lot of press recently. And we are able to run 1,500 tests per day using the automation we have in the lab, and are also looking to scale that. And obviously with FDA decisions coming here shortly with respect to booster shots, people being concerned about waning immunity, we've had a lot of demand, so much so that we have to quickly staff up on customer service. We've had some shareholders who want to get the test who've reached out and who've had some trouble. We are streamlining those processes to make sure that our business development and customer service teams can now handle the demand that's coming, that we expect to really boom in the fourth quarter as people start to look for alternatives with waning immunity. So this lab is doing PCR testing, is doing neutralizing antibody testing, and will serve as the basis for when we launch our laboratory developed tests that we'll talk about in a minute, that will ultimately be for cancer and Alzheimer's disease. As mentioned, we have our Corona Diagnostics subsidiary that's doing reagent sales. This is really where we cut our teeth in terms of understanding all the issues around automation and what it takes to do labs. So we have supported other labs that have gone in excess of 10,000 tests per day. We currently have two clients in particular that are ramping, that have both school contracts, nursing home contracts, and with whom we have established some reference lab agreements, because right now we are the only ones with the sufficient automation to run the CPAS test for neutralizing antibodies, and so we are quite interested in moving this forward. We also have other tests, particularly one from a company called Aditext, that kind of takes a little step further beyond the neutralizing CPAS test. This would give you a subset exactly which antigen presenting antibodies, IgA, IgG, IgM, and their neutralizing status or their status against the nucleocapsid or other domains of the virus. So this is quite interesting, and Aditext is also supposed to be bringing up cellular immunity soon, and we're quite excited about that to complement our offering. So this is definitely something that is supplying our own lab and other labs, and we see this business as potentially growing, especially as we further expand our lead in terms of automation and being able to establish workflows. So now let's talk about a proprietary testing pipeline that will ultimately be brought to market through Provista. The test of interest that was actually acquired as part of the Provista Diagnostics acquisition is the Videssa breast cancer blood test. The Videssa test, let's talk about breast cancer a little bit. 30 million women undergo mammographies annually. 40% of those women have dense breasts, which means that the mammogram is inconclusive. And post-mammogram diagnostic testing is a $7 billion market, and it's widely recognized that there's inadequate standard of care, and we think that Videssa could help address that. So particularly focused on the dense breast population, this is 12 million women annually who effectively don't have effective screening tools because of the density of their breasts. With the data that we generated for this Videssa breast cancer test. It's been rigorously validated across 3 prospective clinical studies. Over $50 million has gone into it, and we've partnered with some of the leading institutions in the world to develop it. And what we've shown is not only do we have good negative predictive value and high sensitivity, we also have shown that based upon the data we have, we can reduce the number of unnecessary biopsies by 45%. And this is obviously quite significant for women who will not have to go through the burden of biopsy, but more importantly, from the pharmacoeconomic perspective for the payers, this is $6,000 per biopsy, talking about potentially 12 million unnecessary biopsies that are happening in the dense breast space, and this could have a very significant pharmacoeconomic impact on this disease. Going forward now, beyond breast cancer, which is going to be the lead for Todos as we bring our proprietary test into market, we have a second test, which is our Alzheimer's test, Limp Pro test. Aduhelm is the first new drug to treat Alzheimer's disease from Biogenetic in the last 20 years that's been brought into the market in the U.S. We obviously know there's a very significant market opportunity for Alzheimer's, which stretches into the billions and potentially trillions going forward. And really the key is twofold. One, we have to have drugs that are effective at treating Alzheimer's. That is an open question. But in order to get those drugs and find out which patients those drugs are going to work on, you first need to find those patients very early, because if you find them late, there's nothing, there's less you can do for them than if you find them early before the damage is done. And so we have this cell cycle dysregulation test, Limp Pro, that can identify patients very early on in the disease process and correlate with amyloid PET imaging using a blood test. And what we've seen is an extremely strong correlation of 0.0002 p-value from studies that we released in 2019, and we're continuing to complete the recruitment for confirmation studies that we expect that just engaged actually with our collaborators at University of Leipzig in Germany earlier today. We expect the enrollment to be complete pretty soon, and we'll be able to get a robust data set out shortly. Beyond that, and underlying and underpinning both of those diagnostic concepts is our Tbia immune screening platform. That platform is really established is the basis and the foundation of Todos. It uses spectroscopy, so a laser to shine a laser through blood. We turn that biological information into data, and we mine the data. We create algorithms, and then we correlate those algorithms with the disease. So far we have done so in breast cancer and colon cancer. We have a CE mark in both of those areas, with breast being our lead. We are currently continuing to gather data, and our strategy to really get enough data to bring this to market robustly is to piggyback the breast cancer test that we have here with Tbia, which has a very low cost of goods sold, onto the back of our Videssa test, which has somewhat of a higher cost of goods sold, but is much further along from a clinical development perspective. So as we commercialize Videssa and bring in to generate revenue, we will be doing a one-to-one correlation with each Videssa sample to our Tbia platform and confirming that data. And so this way we will be gathering data for our revolutionary blood test platform from a position of revenue generation versus a position of having to raise capital and fund it through losses. And so we see this as very synergistic in our approach, and really this offsets a lot of potential dilution risk that you typically see for diagnostic companies. And as in combination with the revenue we're generating from our COVID testing business, we think this really will allow us to separate ourselves from other companies developing tests from an investment perspective, because now we're going to be talking about the different layers of revenue growth versus layers of getting to, revenue generation. And so, we're already building up our sales channels. We have a sales team that's come on. And as we establish those, we intend to exploit those opportunities for our breast cancer tests. The key here, and talking about our Tbia platform, and just, a quick note on this is that because it's AI driven, the more data we get in, the more valuable it becomes. And obviously, the more valuable it becomes, the more ability we will have to collect data. And so we see this as a platform that can compete very well. From a biological perspective, we think it's better than the Grail platform, which has effectiveness, but later stage, because you have to have, by definition, to have a circulating tumor cell, you first have to have a tumor that has shed those cells. And so we believe, the way we're looking at it, which is a chemical, as that's created as a result of a biochemical change that happens very, very early. We can identify cancers very early using this Tbia platform. So just a little bit about the management team. The key people to focus on here are Dr. Jorge Leon, our Chief Medical Officer, was very early executive at Quest Diagnostics, and has helped bring several diagnostic companies like Todos, some small companies, into much larger stages. Most notably, he was heavily involved in the development of the Exact Sciences test, as well as several other tests that were brought to market. And he sees significant potential for our Videssa test to really make a very significant impact in breast cancer and help drive valuation for Todos. And then we have Dr. Paula Trapaz, who is a key doctor at Eli Lilly and who helped bring Eli Lilly's diagnostic test into the marketplace for Alzheimer's disease, the PET test, and she sees our Limp Pro test as extremely complementary. So in summary, we've got proprietary technology platforms. We've created a scalable model that is really ripe for multiple strategic partnerships. We have revenue and expect to continue to expand that revenue and grow the sales channels through which we create revenue, from just reagent sales to now reagent sales in our own lab, and now adding on sales of our dietary supplement Tolovid. And, obviously our therapeutic, ultimately, if that gets to market, can further drive sales quite significantly. And we expect that to move forward. And we're going after some very significant markets that really are unmet, and we think our proprietary technologies can disrupt them. So with that, I thank you, everyone, for listening to the presentation, and I open the floor to questions.
All right, we do have some questions for you, and we'll go over just a little bit for this. Gunter Best asks, do you feel confident in your team to get the uplisting completed before the lockup runs out? What's the chance of extending the lockup if NASDAQ uplisting looks imminent?
Yes, we have confidence in the team to get it done. However, we've got now a very good relationship with, our convertible note holders. And yes, we absolutely expect that if we're close to getting the listing done and we need more than 90 days, that they will support us.
Javian Walters asks, financials are late this quarter. What was the delay attributed to, and when do you anticipate they'll be released?
There's two causes for the delay. One, we changed auditors. So we went from Grant Thornton to a firm called ERL, and we took one of our former Grant Thornton auditor with us, who became our controller. So that new auditing firm had to get familiar with the history of Todos. That had a very significant impact. And as part of that, Todos also made a new acquisition in the second quarter, which was Provista Diagnostics, which is an operating company. And so we had to also consolidate that new entity into our financials. So those two things together caused, basically a delay in the audit. The audit has already been Edgarized. It is in final review. I think Yom Kippur is tomorrow. So Israel will be down, but we expect that the audit, from our perspective, we're ready to press the button. We have not heard any issues from the audit partners who are completing their review. So we expect that it will be filed very, very shortly.
Craig Mathen says, is the PCR and CPAS scalable? Why don't we have 6 to 10 of these labs spread across the country? And are we considering JV with one of the big national labs?
So we're not considering JV with one of the national labs at this point because the deal terms wouldn't make any sense for us. Yes, we are contemplating other locations. However, at this time, we're not in the business of acquiring. With that being said, part of our strategy when we went out for our Corona Diagnostics distribution business was to, figure out which labs that we have helped automate may ultimately fall within our umbrella. So if we're going to go out and build a regional lab strategy to be able to deploy, our proprietary testing, as well as improve turnaround times, from labs that are not close to Provista, we will do so on a regional basis, and we'll do so with labs that we're already supplying as the low-hanging fruit. And we are actively in some of those discussions right now.
Xander Benson says there's chatter circulating that people are having trouble getting the CPAS test from the Provista Diagnostics lab. Are you aware of this?
Yeah, and it's true. We had such an influx of demand when we first kind of launched this, and when we got on some national attention. We've had to improve our customer service because we just weren't prepared for that. And so we've done that. We're now in the midst of hiring. We've already hired a couple of additional business development customer service people. We are expanding our customer service team and our outreach, and we will be getting back to people. We don't think we've lost any significant business as a result of that yet, because now the decisions and the physicians are just becoming aware of the value of the CPAS test. So we haven't, there have been some people who haven't gotten individual tests, but from a larger distribution perspective, those business development relationships are moving forward. So, we appreciate everyone's patience, and certainly, if there are any issues, I actually put my email out there on the internet. Let me know if you're having problems getting CPAS, and we're going to be cracking the whip to make sure that everybody gets the test that they need.
Jerry Braun asks if there are currently any government programs that will drive sales of the CPAS test, and are you aware of any future programs?
Interestingly, the government has a very challenging relationship with these neutralizing antibody tests, because the government message is vaccinate, vaccinate, vaccinate. Don't worry too much about anything else, and that is now being challenged by this whole booster discussion. And so I think the government is going to have to reframe their engagement with neutralizing antibody tests and antibody tests in general. In addition to that, there just isn't that much capacity with these neutralizing antibody tests in the US. And so that's another reason why the government is not pushing them forward. With that being said, every single decision that is being made from every government agency is based upon neutralizing antibody testing data. So it's very clear the government is relying on neutralizing antibody testing data to make their decisions. They just don't think that there's enough data or there's enough capacity in the marketplace for individuals to be recommended to go out and do it. So as we get more capacity, as it becomes available, I think there are going to be more and more use cases for this. One use case, which we did not expect at all, but heard and are now serving as one of our clients, is physicians who are prescribing monoclonal antibody therapy, which are neutralizing antibodies for patients that are immunocompromised. That particular product has actually been approved for people who are immunocompromised when they're exposed to COVID, so not even necessarily a diagnosis. So as you can imagine, what's happening for some of these people is, you're immunocompromised, but you still go to the bar and you don't wear a mask. You figure out you've been exposed to COVID, you go get, monoclonal antibody therapy. And then you do it again and again. And so a lot of these physicians now are asking, sometimes, are we over-treating? What is the pharmacodynamic of the neutralizing antibodies that we're giving to these patients, and how long do they last? And, people don't really know. And so that is actually, we expect that's going to be a pretty big market for people to say, look, you're immunocompromised, but guess what? I gave you antibody therapy 2 weeks ago. You still have it. So you don't need another $2,100, monoclonal antibody therapy, but guess what? Come back in 2 weeks, take another CPAS test. Let's see if you do. So,
Right.
It's turning out that there's a lot more use cases for this CPAS test than we originally anticipated. And we expect that to continue, especially as the decisions, especially with the FDA decision and discussions on the booster coming in the weeks ahead. We see this as something that's really driving interest in CPAS.
Jada Norris wants to know, what does your typical customer look like that's ordering the CPAS test?
Typical customer, 60 plus. They had their vaccination sometime in Q1, and they're saying to themselves, do I still have protection? That is the persona. Certainly, we're getting interest from nursing homes, who want to understand, what does their herd immunity really look like? And do we need to start having, wings of people who will have lower immunity versus wings who have higher immunity in their facility? How do you protect, or do we put in some additional protocols for people who are not producing, antibodies? So there's a lot of people who have previously had COVID, and we've heard about this. There are actually some healthcare groups out there, despite the guidance from the government, who are giving an exemption on the vaccine requirement based upon whether or not someone previously had COVID. The question is, okay, well, you had COVID, but do you have antibodies? Because not everybody who got COVID ends up with a robust antibody response. Or how long ago did you have COVID? And because a lot of anti-vaxxers who got COVID, they don't want to get the vaccine. Or even if you got the vaccine and then you got COVID, getting the vaccine isn't necessarily a pleasant experience. And so people want to know whether they have that protection. So it really is, as it's, turning out, there are many, many, many use cases for this neutralizing antibody test.
Marvin Cannon says, Todos has been active in the press. Do you think there'll be more coverage?
Yes.
And Jay House says, how soon will Tolovid be rolled out in Europe, Asia, and the U.S.?
Tolovid, we expect it to be rolled out in Europe pretty soon. Absolutely. In the U.S., as we mentioned, we've been building up our distribution channels. Amazon obviously is a key one. We also have some retailers that are looking to bring their product onto the market, wellness clinics in particular, as well as CBD stores who have people who use herbal products in lieu of pharmaceuticals, or in combination with pharmaceuticals, or to reduce their pharmaceuticals. A lot of those stores have also expressed interest in carrying Tolovid. And so now, now that we have the Tolovid Daily, it's the question of which of those products they're really going to want to bring out is what their decision factor is.
Drew Meyer wants more information about Tolovid. Like, are you going to be ramping up marketing around it? And is supply chain in order for a mass marketing push? What are your plans?
Yes, we will absolutely be ramping up marketing around it. One of the key things that we're working on from a marketing perspective is getting the right kind of influencers, because with the wrong kind of influencers, you'll end up with FTC problems that we don't want to end up with. So, just given the nature of the product and what it does. So that answer is, yes. From a supply chain perspective, we're very confident in our supply chain. One of the things we've had to do is over the last several months, and I know a lot of people don't understand this, is, we're testing a diversity of suppliers, so we never get stuck in a position where we cannot supply. And so that's a lot of what's been going on over the last several months. We've got now some several very, very good suppliers of raw material that we have validated, that NLC Pharma has worked with us to validate in terms of this 3CL protease inhibition. And so, we're confident that we can do larger, more robust campaigns.
Is Todos close to a partnership?
No comment.
Tom Zhu wants to know, where are we at with India clinical trials?
Preparations are in process. So we have a CRO. We've retained a physician to work with us who's based in India to engage with that CRO that comes to us through one of our clinical collaborators in India. And now, actually, one of the key decision points is, some over there are pushing for us to actually use the Tolovid formulation as opposed to the Tolovir formulation because it has an accelerated pathway into the marketplace. And so we're evaluating, how that could impact our global program and whether it would accelerate, decelerate, because Tolovid already has a regulatory approval in the US. So that is one key decision point we have to make.
Last question from Marie St. Jean. How is international distribution of traditional testing business going? And what do you see as the most important part or partner necessary to ramp that up now?
So we've not done any, the challenge with international distribution of reagents and testing is that we have very little legal recourse. So, a lot of it's either done through governments. And if you're dealing directly with the government, that's fine. But often you have, these kind of pseudo government, and then there's always some guy in the middle who's trying to get paid, and it becomes a challenge from a credibility perspective. And certainly we're not going to get involved in a kickback issues. So wading through that is challenging. And we don't really necessarily have a competitive advantage from an international distribution with any of our current products because we're not the manufacturer. Now, when we bring out Tolotest, which is our proprietary diagnostic that is, measuring the 3-cell protease, well, then we will own, the world from that perspective because we're the only game in town. And so that is, where our international distribution efforts will focus. We spent a lot of time early on, we got approvals in, Brazil and here and there, and it didn't amount to much. And so we focused on the US where we built a business. And it's pretty clear, you need something proprietary to be successful internationally.
Gerald, this is thrilling technology, and we really enjoy every presentation of yours and want you to come back on with more future updates at our next conference. Please do. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much.
All right, everyone, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back at 3:30 p.m. Eastern time, so pop back on with us, and we look forward to seeing you soon.